name is Mark James.
And why are you here at InfoSec today?
We're here at InfoSec to represent Eset as a company, which I think enables our customers and potential customers to come and meet us, see us face to face, and find solutions for them in the IT security business.
And how are you finding the convention so far?
It's really good. I mean, InfoSec's a strange one, I think. Is a good mix of people, a good broad range of people, to come and see. Sometimes it's really busy on the first day. I don't think it was really busy yesterday. It's certainly not as busy as it has been. And today, hopefully, it'll be. If today's like yesterday, it'll be really good. But some, tend to find that it tends to sort of peter off a bit as it goes down. But as long as it's not quiet, that's the main thing. If it's consistent, then it's good.
So what do Eset do?
So Eset provide internet security products, so things like endpoints, servers, desktops, mobile solution, along with things like two-factor authentication and encryption, all manner of software that would go and protect your business on-premise. So this is about protecting the endpoint of the product from threats from the internet or from file-based activity.
So what would you say is the biggest challenge your company and companies like you are facing at the moment?
I think from a threat point of view, ransomware is the sort of main concern at the moment. And I think the reason of that is because it's so finite when it takes hold. We've obviously malware's been around for a while and ransomware is delivered via malware. But I think traditionally malware is fixable. With the right knowledge, with the right effort and the right approach, pretty well any malware can be sorted out, removed, fixed at some point. And I think the problem with ransomware is once the malware takes case and we move to encryption, ransomware is very finite, and I think people are then presented with a situation that it suddenly dawns on them that actually I can't get out of this. I can't, my only course of solution here is I either pay the ransom, which is just funding criminal activity, basically rewarding the bad guys for what they're doing, restore from backup, if they've done a backup, which is a complete another story altogether, or they'll hopefully wait for a free decryptor to become available to decrypt the data. From our point of view, it's obviously about making sure that we are consistently good at what we do, so we need high levels of detection and consistent. Our customers need to trust our product, so it's okay detecting everything all the time, but you also need that it works, it does what it needs to do. It's not too resource heavy, so the customer needs to ideally install the software and pretty well forget that it's there. They just need to be notified if there's a problem and either be told, yes, we've dealt with it, or you need to do something to deal with it.
So what do you think we're seeing quite an increase in ransomware in the UK at the moment? I
think ransomware for me is a strange one, and it's almost like if you buy a new car, you tend to see that car everywhere, and I think ransomware is the same thing because it is so finite, because it causes so much damage. And I get the feeling these days, to be honest, that people, because they're familiar with malware, we hear about the big stories, we hear about the 100 millions, the 200 millions, the quarter of a billions, or if it really hits a bit close to home, so it's like your Twitters and your Tumblrs and your places like that, because we sort of relate to that. But I think people now just accept that malware is part of having an internet connected computer. But I think the difference with ransomware is because once you get ransomware, even bad ransomware, we talk about good and bad malware, but even bad ransomware, once it's encrypted your files, you really are presented with what could seem as no way out of a solution. There is no way forward unless you've got a good backup. Even paying the ransom isn't necessarily going to get your files decrypted because of the processes used. The payment is taken, then your decryption keys are sent to you. Well, if the law authorities or the antivirus firms bring down the servers that are actually distributing these decryption files, then you're never going to get your files returned. So because I think it is so finite, people are very concerned about ransomware. It's something that we typically find in this industry and in most industries, people only talk about things that go wrong. People don't say, oh yeah, turn my machine on today, it was absolutely brilliant, no problems, had a great day at work, come home. You don't. You get down the pub or you get into a meeting and you talk about things that didn't work, that caused problems to your day. And I think ransomware is very much like that. It is. Once it hits, it's something that people talk about. And I think on the other side of it, because it's successful, because it doesn't require the whole process to be successful, all it needs to do is encrypt the files, and then all it needs to do is to get somebody onto a website to pay some kind of digital currency. After that, it doesn't matter whether it decrypts, it doesn't matter whether it works or not. From a business model point of view, it's in their interest to decrypt the files, because although what they're doing is wrong, they want you to trust in the fact that yes, if you pay your money, you'll get your files back. It isn't always going to happen, but I think that's the key thing, is the fact that it is so finite and it's so blunt when it happens, especially when we see things like that in the health industry, where we can really relate to that, where an operation hasn't happened because a server's been unavailable or a desktop's been unavailable, or it is a monetary organisation where they couldn't supply a service because something specific has happened like that.
So, what sort of percentage of cases where people pay the ransom and then they don't get their files back, do you know?
I don't. We don't really see those figures. And the problem is, it's almost, people will pay the ransom because, normally from a business model point of view, the payment required fits that sort of market. So if it's a mobile solution, £10, £15. If it's a desktop solution, maybe £50, £60 possibly. If it's a business, £300 or £400, which, if you look at the whole sort of side of things, it's not a massive amount of money. And sometimes, and it's presented like that for people to go, do you know what? I've wasted £400 on something worse than that, or I've lost £15 on something worse than that, and there's a chance I might get my files back. And yeah, if the original servers haven't been brought down, then yeah, there's a really good chance you'll get your files back. But the problem is, we are funding criminals. We are rewarding these people and say, hey, you've done something absolutely bad, really catastrophic, and here's a reward. It doesn't make any sense. But the problem is you are presented, when we look at things which are possibly irreplaceable. If you look at the home market or the consumer market, if it's your personal photographs, the photographs that you absolutely cannot take again, and your simple choice is, I've got pictures of my son and my daughter's 10th birthday party, absolutely fantastic, gorgeous sunny day out in the garden, everybody was there, special family come over from Australia, beautiful photographs, and I'm presented with a ransom screen. I haven't really backed my files up, I didn't think it affected me, I'm not a business. And where are you? What are you going to do? You're presented with an option to pay £20 to get your files back. Most people I think are going to go for that. They don't necessarily correlate the two between, I'm funding a criminal or I'm paying somebody to do bad things. And of course the other thing is, do people actually say, if they've paid the money, so they feel like they've been affected by the actual ransomware in the first place, they talk about that? Most of the people don't. It's happened, I'll deal with it. You've paid your money and then you haven't got anywhere. The amount of people I think that are going to actually shout and say, I've paid my money, I was infected in the first place, I paid my money, because you haven't got any recourse, you're not going to get a refund. These people have already proven that they're immoral, they're bad people, because they've infected you in the first place.
They're like parking tickets.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a case of, the people, you do hear about people, certainly, and I think larger organisations where they paid the ransom and they haven't heard anything, but we certainly don't get I don't think we get a good, idea of how many do or don't. But of course the problem is it is our job to get these servers shut down. It's the same servers that send out the information in the first place that are going to lock your computer, and it's our job to make sure that we get those closed if we possibly can, to stop you from being infected in the first place. But of course the downside of that is the process. Your payment process is very different to the process that you get for receiving your decryption keys, and you have to do one before it will actually try and contact the server to say, this person's paid their money, you can now give them the keys, and if that server's been taken down, it isn't going to happen.
So what are the most common sorts of ransomware that are out there at the moment?
Well, we've seen the different types of ransomware, and I think it's more about how it's delivered. Ransomware typically these days is being delivered via sort of email attachments or off to websites, and people are being directed towards that, where malware is coming down, and then like your ransomware, your typical your Locky ransomwares that we've seen recently in the news, which are targeting people and doing that. And but the problem is ransomware is pretty well taken on that name that people are very, very familiar with. And when you start drilling down to names of particular ransomware, you tend to find people just zone out. They don't really see that. And for me, it's a bit like the old sort of virus. People talk about virus like, I've got a virus. People don't necessarily associate that. The fact, to be honest, we see very few viruses around these days. The malware is what is there, but people still associate that with the sort of the name virus. And ransomware is the same thing. And I think it's the damage that ransomware projects. But it's sort of, emails and those are the sort of the ways where people are clicking on those links, and we're back to that sort of familiarity problem where people will get an email from they think somebody they know or a business that they think that they trust, and again they're using such tactics to trick people into saying, look, you need to click this. If you don't click this, something really, really bad is going to happen. Or it might be a case of, look, if you want to use your credit card or if you want to access your money, you have to go and check these details. And for every one person that looks at it and goes, oh, well, that's a scam, there's possibly a couple of people that are going to go, well, I've got a really important event this afternoon. I need to make sure that my bank's working or my credit card's working. And those tactics, they're all combined together. The whole idea is to trick you into doing something. And the problem is people, I think, people don't take the same approach. If I come and tapped on your front door and I said, oh, hi Mark, I'm the bank manager of your local bank. I just need your credit card details and your PIN number, and your mother's maiden name if you've got it, and your full password, and any other security question, the chances are you would have already slammed the door. The door would have been closed. You could even be on the phone to the police already. But yet if I do it in an email and take on that official logo in the top corner, a couple of bits of information that you're familiar with, and it might be something that's been harvested from some other breach. We hear about breaches, and people automatically say, well, was my credit card details taken? Was my important information taken? But the problem is, for me, it's down to familiarity. Just a name, an address, maybe a date of birth, or even just getting something right, getting your bank right. We still see emails. I still get emails from, Western Union Bank. I don't have a Western Union Bank account. And as soon as I see that, it goes in the bin. But if I see an email from a bank that I have, then I go, oh, hold on, that needs me to take it a stage further. If I then see a full name and a full address and a postcode, then I'm starting to think, well, actually, there is a chance that we might have some familiarity information there, and that's the problem. It's just, when we sit in front of screens, we often, I think, sometimes just overlook that sort of level that we would really associate if somebody would have come knocking on the door.
So where do you think we are in relation to the battle between the good guys and the bad guys? Are the good guys always going to be trailing the bad guys, or do you think, are you an optimist that things are going to improve?
Well, it's a really difficult one because ironically, they both feed from each other. The bad guys will get better, the good guys will get better. The problem is we've moved very much now into a multi-billion-dollar business, and like any business, if you throw money at it, if it generates money, you'll throw more money at it. It's if it works. And the thing with all of these is it's quite strange, and it's a bit like sort of spam emails and those sort of things. For me, I often think to myself, who buys these things that we see on spam emails? And previously it was all sorts of, pharmaceuticals and things that we would see coming in an email, and you look at them and you think, who buys that? But for spam to be effective, somebody had to buy it. And ransomware is the same. When you get a dodgy email through, and I'll look at an email and I'll instantly see that it's poor grammar, they've got the name right, dear user, dear customer. I even had emails where they've got the name wrong, and you just think to yourself, who clicks on this? But somebody must click on it. At the end of the day, we could completely eradicate it. But the problem is, I think from our point of view, I think we're generally too trusting. We generally want that person to be a nice person. We generally want that email to be a good email. And I think the problem is when it coincides with a real life event. If you've been to the bank and you've been speaking to the bank manager, and then this afternoon you get an email to say you've got a problem with your bank, you're more likely to go, oh, okay, well, I was there this morning, I'll click on that and we'll have a look at that. And I don't think, out of the blue when the email comes through, they end up in the bin. I think those aren't the ones that are going to cause the damage. It's the ones where, we haven't necessarily, or we do associate with something that happens in real life. As regards to us and them, there are certain situations where they have the advantage. So they have access to our software, they have access to what we can and can't do. They know what our software and what other vendors' softwares can do. But then on the same note, we have the things like our heuristics, behavior analysis. We can preempt certain ways that they use as an attack method. So, some places we're ahead, some places they're ahead. And it's just a consistent game, I think. I don't necessarily think cat and mouse, because cat and mouse always, to me, means that they're ahead and we're always behind. And I don't think we are. We really aren't. Sometimes we are ahead, sometimes they are behind. But I think the nature of what we do is always going to be perceived as they're one step ahead of us, And I don't think they're not. Sometimes we're up, sometimes they're up. And I think that's just the nature of this business.
Do you think organisations are good enough with regards to informing their staff on security issues and that?
I personally think it is one of the shortfalls, and I think sometimes the problem is we get very fixated on saying to people, you must watch your links, you must watch your emails, you must be careful when you plug USB sticks in, you must do this. And I think sometimes education is great, but people need to understand why they're doing something. People need to be, I think, pulled into, and it's a bit like saying, look, the current method that we're seeing malware at the moment is coming in through links from emails from people you possibly know. And if you're seeing these emails, just you clicking on this email could bring malware into the business. And we want you to be an important, integral part of protecting our business. You're just as important as the guy in technical, as the guy in security, because ultimately, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And I think the problem is, it's okay educating, but people need to understand why they're important. And I think if we can get that right, I think those levels are going to come up. We shouldn't be putting the onus on the end user, but we have to allow them to take a little bit of control, but we also need them to take a little bit of credit. We need them to say, we're all responsible for protecting our business, because in theory, that attack could come from any one of us. Anybody in this business could, if they're getting emails or they've got access to the internet, then they potentially could be the route that malware comes in. So I think it's a mixture of things. We need a good policy in-house, we need a good information about what the current attack vectors are, we need some good internet security products, some good guidelines on keeping our operating system and our applications up to date. But again, we do need to make sure that our users understand the importance of being part of that security community. Regardless of what they do. They don't need to be technically minded, whether they're sales, marketing, upper management, lower management, senior management, whatever. Everybody is an integral part of security, and everybody needs to be involved. And more importantly, they need to understand why they need to be involved and how they can help.
So how do you think we can address the skills gap? Because at the moment there's a bit of a shortage of security professionals. I mean, how would you sell your profession to someone just coming out of university who's thinking of maybe aiming for that career? Yeah,
I think for me it's the challenge. This isn't a market that is going to get stale. Every single day there is a new challenge. If you want to, some people like the idea of going to work, doing the same job, getting paid, coming home, weekends coming, great. And if that's for you, brilliant. But I think in this industry, it's the excitement of saying, this is what my plan should be, this is how my day is going to run, and I'm going to get into the office and all of a sudden it's going to be, whoa, something's happened, I need to get my teeth into that. And the ability, I think, in this industry, because it can be individuals that can make the difference on the malware side of things. On the same note, it's individuals that can make the difference on the security side of things. And it might just be somebody saying, actually, have we thought about this attack vector, or could we stop this route, or if we did this, then maybe that would affect that. And I think it's always about those ideas. And I think everybody likes that pat on the back. Everybody likes to be that person that did avert that disaster. And I think sometimes in this business as well, it's about, yes, you've stopped it, yes, you've done it, but because it didn't happen, there was no hoo-ha, so therefore there's nobody going, you see in the films where somebody's averted this disaster and the whole floor erupts and its hand pauses, and yay, you don't necessarily get that. But I think it's just part of knowing that you are an integral part, or you are the key person that helped stop that particular problem, from getting into the business. So I think it's the taking part, it's the excitement of something, quite different. There's been situations where you come in every day and it's completely different, and it's a real challenge. And it's also a challenge to adapt, it's continually learning, continually being better and better and getting better in your field. And I think that's the exciting part of it.
So, final question, what are your predictions in the security field for the next year, 18 months?
Oh, there's an interesting one. It's quite interesting actually, because I get asked this question quite a lot, and we hear about, it has to be that sort of mobile environment. Now, whether that mobile environment is IoT, whether it's the sort of the adaptation or the adoption of something a little bit more than a mobile phone. At the moment everybody's got mobile phones, and it's all sort of wearable devices. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that sort of real integration into everything we do, and it's almost a bit like the sort of Minority Report thing where, you'll walk into somewhere and there'll be targeted ads, or there'll be targeted information specifically which is going to pick up your information, it's going to know stuff about you, and it's going to deliver that. So, I think that the biggest threat is going to be containing this information, keeping this information as secure as we possibly can, but then still allowing people to access it to do what everybody wants to do. You know, our worlds are becoming so much integrated into the internet. You know, I mean, my sort of family at the moment, I think most people's families are the same. You know, it's about mobile phones, it's about Facebook, it's about Twitter, it's about Instagram, it's about all of these different networks and all being part of these networks, but more importantly, being able to communicate with lots of people at the same time. You know, I mean, I still remember for me, you know, in the older days, communication was picking up the phone and you talk one-on-one to a person, you know, and nowadays, you know, one-on-one conversations is just a thing of the past. You know, it's either a messaging system, or it's a conference call, or it's a video call, you know, and it's all very much all of this information and data moving around, and it's just making sure that we keep hold of this data. You know, more and more of our lives are becoming digitized, are becoming accessible right now wherever we are in the world. You know, and I think it's about protecting that data and just making sure that it's not about being first to be able to offer something new. It's about saying, look, we weren't necessarily first, but we have looked at your data and we have really had a good chance to see how we can protect your data and try and keep it as safe as we possibly can. So we want you to trust us, not necessarily to use us. And I think that's what we need to be concentrating on. It's more of the trust level rather than that first thing or first event, you know, which we're seeing so much of. And we do see these new things, you know, driverless cars, or cars that are able to just get us from A to B and integrate with everything else, and everything is, you know, keyless and personless. But on the same note, you know, we need to make sure that we've stepped back and, you know, just because we can do it doesn't mean that we need to do it. You know, we do need to look at the whole picture to say, look, what would happen if somebody managed to get into that system? You know, what would happen if somebody managed to take control of that system? And I think sometimes we just need to look at the security side of things before we say, yeah, we're the first to do that, or we can do that.